So here in Arizona, and we know that there are lots of other states out there that are starting to do the same thing that Governor Ducey has done, which is ease up on the restrictions of the states and opening their states up. Like a handful of the states, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia, Florida, have all opened up their states 100%. Here in Arizona, our governor signed an executive order on March 25th that stated that events of 50 or more people no longer need local government approval. So this is for concerts, the youth sporting events, soccer games, baseball games, all that stuff. They don't have to go through the local government to get approval to have those. All the guidance that have been out that were requirements are now just recommendations. So everything transitions to just as a recommendation of what they should do, but each employer is allowed to kind of make their own decisions. Restaurants can operate at full capacity, and there are no enforceable mask mandates. So it's, as I said above, it's up to the businesses, and they can require employees and or visitors to still wear masks, but it's really up to them. So what does this all mean? It means that each employer, based on their industry, based on their employee feelings, their workforce, the work that they do, can make decisions on how they operate their business. They're not held to the standards of the executive orders or their local governments. However, the CDC hasn't changed their guidelines and their recommendations and their requirements for business owners and for folks. The CDC guidelines are still wear your mask, socially distance, whether or not you've had a vaccine. Now, if you are in a household and both of you have had the vaccine, that's different. If you go to someone else's house and they've all been vaccinated, then that may differ. But otherwise, they're still recommending everyone to wear a mask. So it's really kind of an all or nothing thought process, at least in my viewpoint on this. If you as a business decide that you are going to still require your employees to wear masks, then all employees should have to wear masks. I don't think that you get to choose and say, oh, well, you've got the vaccine, you don't have to, you have to wear a mask. I think it's an all or nothing because there can be discriminatory pieces to that. Some companies and some organizations I'm finding are deciding that their employees must still wear them, but if their customers or their patients aren't, they're not going to push that or enforce that. So that's another piece of the mask mandate. And that's the big piece of this executive order. And this is the one that everyone's most interested in. I know that several restaurants are going maskless. So employees and customers, no one has to wear a mask. Again, I think that's about, for a customer, that's their choice on if they decide they want to go to those locations or if they want to wear a mask. But I think this is where employers need to be careful in how we manage this and making sure that we hopefully that our employees aren't bullying each other about if they choose to wear one or not, if the company chooses to not have masks required.
Can I throw something in there real quick?
Of course.
So Senator Leach's bill there were slight modifications to it, but it's Senate Bill 1377 just passed, and it's on the way to Ducey's office for signature. And I don't know if anybody's seen any of the updates that I've sent out. However, what his bill is it's called the Employer Liability Bill. And it states that an employer is protected from any type of lawsuits or damages. And if anybody can kind of trace it back to them getting the virus at that business owner's location. However, it is based upon a negligence, a gross negligence standard. So they do have, the plaintiff does need to prove that there was gross misconduct or gross negligence, I think is how the word is written inside the act, or soon to be law. But I think that should be a part of your decision, because if the CDC recommendations are to continue social distancing, to continue masks, or if you have partner firms that are also continuing to wear masks and social distance and take the recommendations of either the CDC or the Arizona Department of Health, that might be a part of the conversation at some point in the future if there is a plaintiff. The act is going to be retroactive until 2020. So it is going to be protecting anything that happened during the national emergency. Technically, it's not going to go into enforce until after the our chambers both close session this year. And then I think it's like 60 days after they close Sendai. But it is going to be retroactive. However, kind of thinking through and hearing what Diana is saying is that we do have, the executive order that is removing those requirements from the executive order perspective from Governor Ducey. And there are protections from employers, but it is still based upon a certain level of negligence. And I don't know how that's going to get defined. And I don't know if Dennis is on, but I don't know how that's going to get defined if there's going to be tension between the CDC or Arizona Department of Health versus the executive order saying that you don't need to do it. And how do they determine kind of where that negligence may or may not fall? So it's part of the relevancy of the conversation. But I think it's something that just kind of needs to be discussed.
Well, and that's where, as we've been working with our clients on this piece of it, it's really about, I believe, still following the CDC guidelines. We're not at herd immunity, and I'll be talking about vaccines in a minute, so we'll go into more detail of those. But it's really about making sure that we're keeping people, we still have to keep each other safe and being thoughtful around all of that, even though our state and other states are starting to loosen the guidelines around all of this. So vaccines. Whoa. You're muted, Pete. I don't. Okay, so vaccines.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I clearly leaned on the keyboard.
Something, yeah.
But I do want to mention is that it was noticed, and I was told that I did actually reserve 90 minutes. I just thought we'd get through in 60. So you do have a little bit longer than 7 minutes.
Okay. So vaccines. So in Arizona, we've had 1.32 million people that have been fully vaccinated, or 29.5% of our population. In the USA as a whole, there have been 46.36 million people that have been fully vaccinated, or 14% of the population. That's not anywhere near where the CDC and WHO have said that herd immunity would be. They're saying it's somewhere between 70 and 95% would be considered that we would be safe. So this is where, while vaccines are important and that people need to really think about it on a personal level as well as an organizational level about vaccines, we still, as currently right now, we still have to make sure that we are protecting and keeping everyone safe. So mandates. Can we make vaccines mandatory? Maybe. We still don't really know. We haven't gotten any guidance, real guidance from the government or the CDC about it. If you do choose to make them mandatory, there are several exceptions that you need to think about as you go through all of this. Disability reasons, religious, worker comp claim potentials if someone gets severely ill from having a vaccine. What are the industry requirements and necessity, and why are you really thinking that you need to make it mandatory? What are the state and local laws? There is a court case. The first court case has been filed in New Mexico so around making vaccines mandatory. A gentleman who is a first responder in New Mexico is suing his employer, the state, saying that he should not be forced and is afraid to lose his job because he does not want to get the vaccine. But as a first responder, they're making it mandatory. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes through the courts. And it was literally just filed in the last couple of days. So it'll be something that all of us will be watching closely and to see what happens. But can we encourage our employees versus making it mandatory? And this is where, next slide. No, there we go. Where the employers, as we continue to return to work and stop working from home, things that we need to really start thinking about with the COVID vaccine and preparation. So having a committee, that return to work committee, talk about COVID vaccines, do an employee survey to get a pulse on how their employees are feeling about getting the vaccine. If you've deciding to have it happen, coordinate with the resources and the support of our health insurance carriers, with the local health departments, the vaccine distribution websites. Here in Arizona, we're open and anybody 16 or older can get the vaccine, but in a lot of other states, that's not the case yet. President Biden has put into play that he wants everyone that would be able to get the vaccine be eligible to do so by May 1st. So some states have already opened it. Other states are waiting till May 1st. Maybe instead of making it mandatory, let's find ways to encourage our employees to get it. We know that people are starting to feel relief once they do have it. So can we encourage our employees to go get it by covering the 2 hours it takes them to go get the vaccine, or giving them paid time off to go get the vaccine or recover from getting the vaccine, or maybe a small spot bonus of $50 or $75 so it's a small, you want to make it small enough if you do a bonus so that it doesn't feel like you are coercing them, forcing them to go get it. And then continually communicating with the employees on the safeness of the vaccines, helping to kind of relieve the fears of our employees, making sure that they've got access to be able to sign up for it if they want to do it. If employees want to share with each other that they've gotten the vaccine or not, that's fine. But as employers, we shouldn't be sharing that information with others, which is tied to mask mandates and kind of saying, oh, well, these people have the vaccine, so they don't have to wear a mask, versus those that don't have, they're required to wear a mask. It's where that all or nothing kind of comes in, that helps keep the privacy of all of that in place. If one of the questions I got earlier was, if I can't require the vaccine, can I then require weekly testing or daily testing? I would say, unless you have already been requiring testing on a weekly basis, on a regular basis of your employees, and you are comfortable paying for the costs of doing that, I wouldn't recommend doing weekly testing or daily testing of your employees unless they're sick or showing symptoms. But I would rather see, if you're worried about those things, that to continue to do the COVID questionnaires and the temperature checks and those types of things that we've been doing since the beginning of all this, rather than implementing a testing regimen through this process. Which then is then tied to returning to work. Hopefully a lot of you have already had kind of a return to work plan that you've worked through since the beginning of all this, as we've worked through different stages of this pandemic. But if you haven't, I would create a committee of both leadership and employees to help create that plan and what does it look like, so that you hear the voices of everyone. And in that preparation, you're going to look at what are you currently doing? What do we need to maybe adjust? What do we need to do to our offices to bring people back? What do we need to put into place or change that we were doing before that may not work coming back? Inform, again, that whole communicate, communicate, communicate. We can't communicate enough to our employees and staff about where we're at with this, where we're going, what we're doing to keep them safe. Prevent. So what are the protocols that you've got in place to ensure that the health and safety is being managed and maintained within all of the organization? And then the recover part of continuously monitoring. Since the beginning, we've had some kind of plan in place. First, it was working from home, then we may have had staggered shifts, or we've moved our office spaces around so that people aren't sitting right next to each other. So continually monitoring that process and looking at what that means and how this all works. In your return to work plans, you should also be thinking about employee morale and where are we with all of that. Mental health strategies and making sure that our employees have the resources they need. A lot of people are fighting, COVID fatigue. They're really tired of all of this. So how can we make sure that we're taking care of our employees? And then our business continuity. This was a shift that most of us never knew we were going to have to deal with. And so if you didn't have a business continuity plan before, hopefully you've put one in place during all of this. If you haven't, this is a great time to start thinking about that and making sure that you've got all the pieces to the puzzle in place, because what normal was before, I don't believe will ever be our normal again. I think we have to think about what makes sense going forward.
Diana, we got a question on email.
Okay.
And then I'm going to try to summarize it. So understanding that we have a number of different types of industries
Yes.
that are our clients. So if they're looking at kind of what they have been doing versus what they need to be doing, what's a good resource? I mean, are you seeing that like different associations are providing different types of guidance based upon the type of industry that they're in, like restaurant association versus like a dental association? I mean, because clearly it's a different type of reaction. Are you finding that those are good sources to kind of help them kind of condense down?
Yes, definitely. The different associations for the industries are definitely a great resource. The CDC has done a pretty good job of looking at different types of businesses and helping come up with some basic guidelines, and their guidelines for a restaurant are different than what it would be for a healthcare company. So there are resources out there. It just may take a little bit of digging to get where you need to be, but there are resources to find for your industry.
And one of those resources is Arkwood HR.
Yes, we'll do all the research for you if that needs to happen.
Sorry, I had to do a shameless plug.
And we had the top 10 list early on in our career. So back in our early town halls, and I thought I would pull it back out, and I tweaked it a little bit for a new top 10 list of things as employers we need to kind of just continue to think about as we go through this and as we see the light at the end of the tunnel. So follow the guidelines that are provided by the CDC, by OSHA, by the DOL, and by our state and local authorities. Really take all of those into consideration as we continue to move forward and try to get back to some kind of whatever normal is. Find out what matters to your employees, listen to their concerns, talk to your employees, whether it's through a survey or having one-on-one meetings, however you can, throw it a happy hour and just have conversations, because you can learn a lot from your employees just by listening. Learn from the past year. Do you want to go back to where you were? Or can we do things differently? I know as an organization, ARCWIT has learned a ton in this last year, and we are figuring out how we can continue to move forward and grow and be even better than we were before. If I haven't said it enough, I'll continue to say it. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And that's in lots of different ways. Like before, listening to your employees, reviewing and your current policies and handbooks. Do they make sense? Training your employees on workplace privacy, response procedures, business, review and update your business continuity plan. But as always, we must, number 8, keep in mind that everything is etched in sand, so be fluid and ready to adjust. As he said before, we drink from the fire hose. But none of this excuses an employer from existing employment laws. So just because we've had this pandemic and because we've been managing through this, that doesn't mean that we get to not follow the laws that were already in place. And last but not least, be human. We're all in this together. A little bit of grace in all of this helps get through this. Let's find ways to manage the challenges that we as organizations have, but also as our employees are continuing to manage in their day-to-day life.
Right. Denny, you mentioned employee surveys could be an option to help communicate, just to gather some information. Do we have any templates, or have you seen success from employer surveys that if anybody's interested, they can reach out to us?
Definitely. Yeah, I've got some samples that I could give somebody, some basic questions they can ask. And they don't need to be 20 question surveys. It should be 3 or 4 question surveys. You don't want to overwhelm your employees with a lot of questions either, because then you don't get the response you need.
Right. Cool. Thank you.